Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for Man and Machine, the fundamentals of AI for recruiting. We ended up having about 2,000 people register for this webinar, so it's pretty clear that there's a lot of interest in this topic, and I'm really excited to be here with two very smart gentlemen, both of whom I'll introduce in a moment. Before we dive in, I want to give you a quick summary of what we'll be covering. The goal of this webinar really isn't to dive into the weeds on the technical mechanics of AI or the myriad classifications of it. We're going to touch on that stuff, but our goal really is to break down some of the myths and hype around AI and focus on the practical applications of AI in recruiting, both for today and tomorrow. My fellow speakers and I will be sharing some really great real-world applications of AI and suggestions for how to leverage it to augment the value of the human touch and intuition. All right, so a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. To join the audio portion, and I assume if you're hearing this, you've already done this, but you can either connect through your computer speakers or headphones, or call in using the number and access code you see on the screen. And if you have any questions today, please feel free to submit them using the chat window in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. We'll be saving the last 10 minutes or so for the presentation of that Q&A, and our speakers will answer any of the questions you have. Finally, if you're having trouble connecting to ReadyTalk conference at any point, you can call ReadyTalk support at 800-843-9166, and we'll be putting this number in the chat for your reference too. And then finally, we'd love to hear from you on Twitter or whatever social networks the kids use these days. So feel free to tweet at SmashFly using the hashtag #HumanAI. We're going to be looking for your comments, questions, thoughts, dreams, etc. throughout, and we'll have somebody kind of monitoring everything that's going on. So if you ask a question via Twitter, we'll also incorporate that into the Q&A. All right, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's move on to the fun part. I'm going to turn it over to our co-presenters here, or my co-presenters, to let them introduce themselves, and then I'll give a brief intro of myself as well. So Jeremy, up first. You want to go ahead?
Good deal. It's great to be here with everybody today. My name's Jeremy Roberts. I've been in the talent acquisition space for about 15 years now, most of that as a practitioner. I worked in retained executive search, corporate recruiting, and then RPO. Most of that time in recent years focused on starting sourcing teams and kind of doing really deep sourcing. After that, I went on and I was a blog editor for a very popular sourcing and recruiting blog and organized a conference. And then I joined HiringSolved as VP of Customer Experience about a year and a few months ago. So we focus on artificial intelligence to make talent acquisition professionals more productive. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hi guys, my name is Steve Parker. You'll hear everyone on this phone on the webinar probably call me Parker, so you hear that throughout, affectionately known as with my colleagues here. I'm the director of our global RPO technology practice here at Allegis Global Solutions, which we call AGS. AGS is a global provider of RPO, or recruitment process outsourcing services. And I've spent about the last 20 years in technology in various sectors, going on 5 of those at AGS. I'm glad to be here today. Thanks for having me.
All right, and my name is Josh Lane. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at SmashFly. I run kind of our product marketing, go-to-market strategy, and work pretty closely with our partners as well, HiringSolved and AGS being 2 of those. So excited to be here, and I'm going to kick it over to Parker now to get us started.
So hi everyone, again welcome to the webinar. I want to start off with just a thought to kind of set the tone here. If you're like me, you think with your computer. I do this every day. I use it to help formulate new ideas, to help connect thoughts, to help close knowledge gaps for me, to help me get to a prediction or conclusion a lot more quickly than I could on my own. And that's really the point of what we're talking through today, is how do we augment the intelligence of recruiters to make them better in space. And so, again, if you're like me, you're thinking with your computer every day, whether you know it or not. You're experiencing algorithms, you're engaging with different aspects of machine learning that we'll talk through today. But the point of it is really to augment the intelligence of our recruiters and make us better in space. And so to jump into this, we're really living in a new era of recruitment. We started out in the 70s, very employer-centric, right? It was a very manual era, a lot of personal touch, phone calls, it was who you knew, your Rolodex, right? Those that remember it. high agency reliance, and a lot of high cost involved in that with the agencies as well. Moved out of that, moved into the 2000s, a very candidate-centric era, and that's the internet came along. It was a big rise of the internet, obviously changed the game for everything. This is where job boards came into play. This is where applicant tracking systems, or ATSs, really got their rise as well. And then there became a little bit lower agency reliance, but there's still that today. But the internet brought more and more people to job boards, career sites, and applicant tracking systems. And you saw a decline of those personal Rolodex networks and the use of the phone. But now we've moved into this more relationship-centric era, the 2000s and beyond, what we call digitization era. And that's the rise of automation and artificial intelligence. So some of what we'll talk about today is artificial intelligence in the way of machine learning. Some of this is in the way of automation and artificial intelligence and what we call IA, intelligent automation. So we'll talk about the various aspects of that today. And then with this new era along came communications, pipelining, and sourcing via CRMs, or candidate relationship management systems. And so in that digitization era, what you find too is relationships and personalized communication have also become part of what candidates expect from us. They expect to be engaged in certain ways, personalize the communication, and then they want relationships and those communications to come across as well as part of the process. So as you get out of the new era, we're working in this new era, that leads us to digital automation. So if you think about it, recruiters spend a lot of time on activities that could be enhanced through automation, if you think about it. Organizations spend a good deal of their time either sourcing or screening candidates. So how could we make that process better and use digital automation? Well, you have the typical digital sourcing channels. That might be your job boards, your career site, social, all of these different aspects out in the marketplace. If you add to those social channels algorithmic matching models that we're going to talk about today, or algorithms, which we'll talk through, this is a way to enhance a lot of that matching. So matching up candidates to particular jobs and taking those tasks, especially those repetitive tasks, off of a recruiter's desk and augmenting their intelligence where they get better at their jobs and can focus on more specific things. You also see the rise of conversational AI, or what's also known as chatbots. And chatbots combined with algorithmic models and digital sourcing channels can automate a good portion of that process and make your recruiters even more effective to bring the talent into your organization. So the point of this slide is we need to think through digital automation and how we apply it in the technology stack and how we apply it in the organization. This also brings us along to digital augmentation of the candidate experience. So the fundamental message about this and thinking about AI and machine learning and how we actually apply that, candidates really want more communications than humans can actually provide. They want to be communicated with very frequently. They want to be communicated with at the point of interest. And so it's time for us to start exploring this digital augmentation and how we can map in AI to leverage that. The basic point of the slide is that candidates don't want to join your talent community or apply to your job or attend an interview and never have any communication back. They don't want to go into a black hole, right, and feel like that they've given you their information and their time, but have that not be reciprocated back to them. And so as we think about digital automation, let's also think about how we augment the digital candidate experience as well, and where we can use machines to help us communicate more effectively to candidates. Okay, so that brings us into, if you think about the things we've talked about, digital automation, digital augmentation of that candidate experience, let's break down a little bit what artificial intelligence actually means then, and a couple of the aspects of this. Now, I want to be clear that there's a pretty broad spectrum of artificial intelligence out there. What we want to focus on today is a little bit that's definitely impacting our industry, defining it a bit, and getting to some of the subcategories that are being utilized today. So let's look at artificial intelligence. So artificial itself is not naturally occurring, or it's basically a simulation, right? Intelligence is really the ability to think, learn, and understand. So when you combine those two things, what you've got is a simulation of thinking, learning, and understanding, which is fundamentally what artificial intelligence is. Now, we as humans learn through experience. Taste, feel, touch, sight. We learn through experience, and we adapt our behaviors to that, or we come out with better predictions or better outcomes than what we do based on experience. Machines do the same thing, they just do it with data. And so within artificial intelligence, machine learning is a type or a subcategory within AI. And within that, it's really the ability to predict outcomes without explicitly being programmed or being told what to do. And so with data inputs, it's making its own predicted outcomes. Machine learning uses algorithms to accomplish this. So before we get into the rest of this definition, an algorithm is nothing more than a set of processes or a set of rules that's used in calculating, problem solving, and operations. When you think about it from a computer perspective, it's called an algorithm. And so when algorithms are utilized by machine learning, they basically take data input, and on the back end, we're not going to get into today the statistical analysis and linear regression and things like that to go with machine learning, but it uses statistical analysis to predict an output value within an acceptable range. And it can be trained to get better and better about closing in on that acceptable range too, which is some of the aspects we'll touch on today. Now, further breaking down the category even more, you can take machine learning and look at three primary areas, and there are lots more than this, but there are three primary areas that machine learning also takes into account or is broken down to. One of those is supervised, unsupervised, and then reinforcement learning. Okay, so we'll break that down in a moment. But if you combine all these things together, what this means is algorithms are used by machines to predict outcomes without being explicitly programmed. And that gains the AI capability, which is simulating the ability of the computer to think, the machine to think, learn, understand, and basically conduct human tasks. And so that's how you tie those components together. If we look at the next slide, the machine learning categories here are supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning, so we're breaking those down as well. Let's look at supervised learning first. So the first piece here on supervised is that an algorithm makes predictions on a set of training data through corrections, and it makes accurate conclusions. So think of this as a teacher and a student relationship. The machine is the student, and it's making predictions on a set of training data that it's been handed. But in this case, the teacher is always there making corrections with the machine and getting it closer and closer to an accurate conclusion. And in this way, the machine is being trained or supervised to learn. This is called supervised learning. So think of it almost like that conversational AI we talked about earlier in a chatbot. So if you have a chatbot on the front of your career site, people may come in and ask the same question in many different ways. The computer has to be able to, or the machine has to be able to translate that through natural language process, come out with its own predictions to make accurate conclusions, and be trained on that data in order to engage the candidate properly. And so this is a good example of the supervised learning aspect. Unsupervised learning, which is the second category, is a focus area or an algorithm used to draw inferences from data sets. And that might be used for data analysis and find hidden patterns or grouping data together. So let's look at an example of that. Let's take your applicant tracking system or your ATS. ATS may have millions of records in it and applicants across time. You can take an unsupervised learning algorithm to look for patterns in that data. So if you were to apply an algorithm against your applicant tracking system data, all of it over time could be millions of records. It may come out that with some inferences on the data set via analysis, it may say 60% of the applicants in your database are female over time. Of those 60%, 50% of those females had master's degrees. Of that 50%, 35% of those individuals lived in the United States. And of all those inferences, 20% of those females with master's degrees that live in the U.S. were actually hired into your organization. That's taking a large set of data, finding patterns, and doing analysis on that data to give you information that may take you weeks or months to be able to get yourself by just generally analyzing data. So that's an example of unsupervised learning. Reinforcement learning, or the third category here, the focus area there is it's an algorithm or algorithms used to automatically determine an ideal behavior in a specific context to maximize performance. So let's take our applicant tracking system example one step further to give you a real-life scenario here. So let's say instead of letting the algorithm look at all the applicants in your database, you narrow that to the specific context of the job. So within that particular job, you now look at candidates to see how qualified they are for that particular job. So what you're doing is you're taking the context of the job, having the applicants that have come into that particular or applied to that particular job. When that's done, the algorithm is looking and making recommendations on candidates that are the most qualified for that particular role, job family, or category. Now you can take that a step further, and this is where the reinforcement piece comes in. As the AI and the machine learning is making recommendations on those particular candidates, on the other end of it, on the ATS side, there's a recruiter, a relationship manager, that's giving feedback to the algorithm and saying via disposition or a status, yes, I agree with you, machine, move this candidate forward, or no, I don't, I disposition them out. As that feedback is going back from the applicant tracking system to the algorithm, it begins to tweak itself and get better and better about the job family or category of candidates that it's identifying. And so that learning is being reinforced by a human. On the other end, it's helping make those predictions and giving the final selection on recommending candidates that are qualified. Some of the tools out there today actually use a combination of these. Again, back to the ATS example to keep it simple and straightforward, you may have where you use an algorithm to look at your applicant tracking system data first, give you that data analysis, and then turn and have it focus on the applicants in a particular job to give you that feedback, grading, or ranking as well. And when that piece is done, you use reinforcement learning to train that algorithm to get better and better about the selection process. So these are some of those categories. AI, machine learning is a subcategory. We've broken down these categories into fundamentals. Maybe we'll have another session that gets a little deeper and looks at the mechanics of the machine learning in the back end as well. But for our fundamentals, I think this gives us a good view into that. Finally, here we have. Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to ask you. So I think that's awesome. I think it gives a pretty good breakdown of the categories. I think AI and machine learning are two very broad categories. Can we now? I think the issue sometimes is people think about AI very myopically, or it's very kind of narrow. They think about chatbots specifically, or it's maybe kept to a very narrow focus. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other major types of AI that we hear about, or kind of some things that maybe people don't think about that are technically qualified as AI?
Yeah, let's give a couple more examples here. So we've talked through machine learning. We've talked about intelligent automation. If you think about intelligent automation, it's really just, and a good example might be, imagine someone joins a talent community, and at the 30, 60, 90-day intervals, you're having your CRM send them an email with different content that's relevant to what they engaged with in their talent community. So that's kind of an example of intelligent automation, or maybe codes are triggered at certain points via that workflow within your CRM. That's intelligent automation, which also can mimic human tasks. But there's also natural language processing. So the conversational AI, or the chatbots we've talked about, use this a great deal. What they do is they take the language that's being typed in, or they take the language that's being spoken, if that's an AI-driven phone screen, for example, and process that information into machine language. So the machine can use that in the algorithm to make predicted outcomes. So natural language process is definitely part of this. Definitely part of this push in the industry as well. And finally, sentiment analysis. So let me give you a good example of this. There's a large retailer that I've worked with previously that uses this in their contact center. What they have is not candidates, but customers calling in to their service reps. They take the voice and record the voices and the conversations happening between their service reps and their customers, and translate that into text using natural language processing. Once they translate that from natural language processing, they take an algorithm and look at all that context and feedback to see how their customers are feeling or what the input of the customers is, or the feeling of the customers at that time to make them better, what the satisfaction level of their customer is. So that's using machine learning. It's using natural language processing as well to basically give feedback to those customer services rep to let them know how satisfied their customers are.
All right, that's awesome. So I think at the top here, I promised that we wouldn't go too deep into the technical and kind of mechanical weeds here. I think that was an awesome overview, but I think where we want to go now is to kind of head into the real-world level set. So some actual practical examples of what AI is and how it can be used, with talent acquisition teams and kind of in a real-world setting. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Jeremy, who is going to dive more into the practical and the everyday applications of AI.
Yeah, so thank you very much. That was great so far, Parker. I'm excited to kind of dive deeper onto the practical side of things. So if you look at this slide, blah, 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 that right there is, I think, what a lot of us are hearing right now when we hear about machine learning and AI. If you've been to a conference recently or you read the industry blogs, like I said, I was the editor of a blog, and I heard a few pitches every day from companies who were telling me about their ML and AI algorithms and how they were going to just totally upset the industry. Right, and what does that do? I mean, that eventually it just becomes noise to all of us and sounds like this. So what I always tell everybody is to look at your own desk and figure out the most practical ways to use it, right? So some of the things we've been hearing lately, robots will take over most jobs within 30 years, experts warn. Excuse me, the end of sourcing is near. The remaining recruiting challenge is selling. Robots will take over most jobs and erode the middle class, right? So it just starts to sound like a bunch of noise. Technology will replace doctors, lawyers, and other professionals, right? So it all sounds pretty scary, especially when it's coming from Harvard Business Review, right? And then we see things like this. IBM's Watson AI saved a woman from leukemia. Now that's pretty cool, right? Basically, by evaluating her symptoms and all of her test results and everything, it was able to say, well, I think this is leukemia, right? So that's pretty amazing. Now, does that kind of result mean that we will not have doctors in the future or that we'll have fewer doctors? I personally don't think so. I think what will happen, as doctors are able to spend less time diagnosing, then their jobs will change for the better, I think, but it will allow them to spend more time with us, right? How long, I meant to look this up before we talked today, but how long do we each spend with our doctor on average, right? A few minutes maximum, right? Doctors are in and out, and the patient care is suffering right now because of the way their workload is, right? But when machines can diagnose better than humans, physicians won't disappear. They'll basically have more time to spend with us and help us with the things that really matter to us, like how do I stay healthy? What can I do proactively? How can I treat these symptoms? So I think we will all benefit as this technology comes into our space, right? So one of the other things I like to always point out to people, this is from the 100-year study on artificial intelligence. If you've never seen that, Google that, just 100-year study on artificial intelligence. It's really interesting. But one of the things they point out is AI will likely replace tasks rather than jobs in the near term. And it will also create new kinds of jobs, right? So all of this technology is going to need people to come in and troubleshoot and understand the technology, right? And you have to know that industry to know if the technology is working or not. So my job is a perfect example, right? I'm a practitioner who now interacts with users and engineers and helps make sure a product is working, right? So it's going to create new jobs, and it's really not going to do away with us individually right now. It's going to just help us to, it's going to give us a new focus, right? So keep that in mind, and don't be nervous about the upcoming changes. So as you think about AI and automation, I always point out to everybody, if you're a talent acquisition practitioner, you need to kind of know who you are and what your focus is and what your default is, right? There are two types of people out there, and I think I got this from Glenn Cathy when I reported to him years ago. But there are talkers and there are typers, right? talkers, you guys probably know these characters, right? From Wolf of Wall Street there on the left-hand side, we've got a talker, and the talkers are really good at the soft skills of recruiting, right? They like to talk to people. They like to help people. They like to build relationships. They understand how to motivate people and how to put both sides of the deal together, right? Unfortunately, sometimes these people aren't technical enough, right? And they haven't spent enough time sifting through databases and doing the technical side of our business. So talkers, that's the first, I guess, profile. And then over on the right, if you guys have seen Mr. Robot, this is kind of the lead hacker from that series. But the typers are the ones who really love the digital side of recruiting. They like to hunt. They like to find things online. They love using technology tools. And I guess the con for these people is maybe they're not real good. Maybe they never really even learned the soft skills of the business, how to interview a candidate effectively and how to present a candidate to a hiring manager and make sure the deal closes, right? So they may not have learned all those soft skills. So whichever one of these you are, you need to be aware of that and then make sure you're filling in those gaps, because we're going to talk in the next couple of slides about how things are changing, and they're changing very quickly, right? So the technical versus the typer versus talker mix, this is what it kind of looked like in 2008, right? The job of the recruiter had always been, since the beginning of time, to find people, make a match, and put deals together, right? So imagine in 2008, all the social networks were booming. There was a lot of information online. And so this is the ratio of most talent acquisition departments that we saw. There was a technical person feeding names to those talkers, right? And so there was pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio in a lot of organizations, right? Fast forward to 2017, and with automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning and all the things that technology has accomplished in the last 8 or 9 years, we're now seeing this type of structure, right? The software is good enough now that it really only takes one person to support a decent-sized team, because now the problem has transferred. Instead of finding the names and organizing those names, the new problem is engaging with them, right? So we've got more talkers and fewer technical people. So both are incredibly important, but it's important to know where you fall. And if you are the technical person, you've got to continue to get more technical every day, because as things evolve, the problem is going to evolve as well, and we're going to need to be on the relationship side. So if you think about this, as AI comes in, the jobs for a recruiter aren't going anywhere, but we're going to need to focus in on the soft skills. So imagine you come to work in the morning, and instead of doing a keyword search and finding 300 candidates and just calling through that entire list and leaving 45 voicemails and doing 5 or 10 phone screens, imagine you come to work, right, and now your AI technology has sorted your entire database. You posted 3 jobs before you left, and you open your computer, and now it's telling you who you need to call, right? So you're calling the 20 right people from all of your data, and now you're able to move much faster, right? So you need to be good at the engagement piece. On top of that, all of these candidates are hearing a lot of noise, so it's going to be really important to hone in those soft skills. So with data, basically it's become very democratized. Engagement is key. So get really good at the soft skills, and don't lose those technical skills, and hone those technical skills, but really get to know the soft skills of the business. And we'll get into those a little bit more here in a second. All right, where AI and automation and machine learning is already changing talent acquisition, right? It's already providing a more human experience for candidates. Intelligent nurture, right? Nurturing candidates based on their profiles and who they are and what they're looking for. Marketing automation workflow. So all the data you have about candidates is making sure they're seeing the right information at the right time from you. Personalized career site and content for jobs, right? So based on my online activities, when I look at a career site, it's going to tell me what I want to see instead of me having to go search it all out as a candidate. So that's one way. And then we've got giving insight into candidate quality and relevant data. So many of you may be using these, but there are tools out there that will tell you based on someone's code repository at GitHub and Stack Overflow who is the most talented of this bunch, right? Machine learning, if you could ask people to submit information to you, and the machine learning will look at that and tell you who is the best match for your job. Improving diversity and inclusion across organizations, right? Removing unconscious bias. So obviously we have to be careful we don't have AI increasing our unconscious bias. We know that that's a danger. But I think that leveraged correctly, it can remove or reduce unconscious bias. We can detect diversity indicators on profiles that we may not have been able to make sure our outreach is going to diverse candidate pools at the beginning of our search. Building automated talent pipelines, right? So all of those things. I remember as far as automation, when I started in the business, we didn't even have good resume parsers, right? We were cutting and pasting each piece of the resume into our ATS. It was a nightmare, right? Refreshing outdated profiles. So you're sitting on piles of resumes, millions of resumes at some organizations from 5, 6, 7 years ago, but you don't know where they are now or what they're doing. What used to take a research team to go out and refresh those old profiles, now with the push of a button, an entire database can be updated with relevant new job information and contact information. So all of those things are really, really speeding things up and kind of leading the charge as far as why there is less of a need for kind of those tactical, task-oriented people within the organization. All right. Now, as we look at this, where automation comes in, right? I think it's important as you look at the types of roles within your organization to understand where automation is already kind of affecting things. Now, when you look at this chart here, basically these are the 4 quadrants that I would think every requisition within your organization can fall into one of these quadrants. So you've got low scarcity and low criticality. These are people, they're kind of easy to find, and they're not really critical, right? So you can just post those, and then as people apply, interview them, and eventually you'll make a placement, right? So those are kind of on autopilot, right? And then you've got high scarcity and low criticality. These are the recs that it's hard to find those people, but there's no specific time frame attached to them. So if you see this person, then you'd love to hire them, but it's probably not your most important search. And then over on the bottom right, you've got low scarcity and high criticality. So those are, think about like an online retailer distribution center at the holidays, right? Those candidates' skill sets are not incredibly difficult to find, but you have to find them all right before the holiday season, because otherwise people won't get their gifts, right? So that's not a scarce candidate pool, but it's so highly critical that it will take a little bit of touch. Now, and then you've got high scarcity and high criticality. These are the jobs that the candidates are really hard to find and they're really critical. Maybe your company has signed an SLA and you're guaranteeing you'll have someone in this seat within 30 days, and it's really difficult to find those. So as we look at these, right, this next slide demonstrates kind of where automation has already taken over, right? So low scarcity and low criticality jobs are already being affected drastically by automation, right? That's where, the chatbot can put them in the right bucket, and then you can send them an automated assessment, and then they can take that assessment, and then an interview can automatically be scheduled, right? It's not taking a lot of negotiating with a lot of those people, right? So what you're going to see, though, is these outer edges, the high scarcity and high criticality, those are always going to need the human touch. Low scarcity, high criticality, those are going to need the human touch, right? So as a talent acquisition professional, if you want to make sure you're surviving the machine learning and AI disruption, you need to make sure you're not completely in that low scarcity, low criticality box, and really kind of make sure that you're diversified into those other areas. So hopefully that makes sense. Kind of my practical look on what I would think about as an individual if I were nervous about the future.
Yeah, Jeremy, I love that chart there. I think it kind of simplifies where AI can fit in. probably best and easiest in the short term. When we're talking about high scarcity, high criticality, I mean, would you put executive recruitment, diversity initiatives, things like that, where maybe the talent pool is fairly scarce, but it's critical to the organization? Does that fit in there, and is AI maybe not such a great fit, or is it still a good fit? It just requires more human touch and intuition.
Well, so AI would still be a good fit, right? I mean, if you think about high scarcity and high criticality, I worked for an aerospace and defense contractor, and one time I had a search that was for a space situational awareness engineer, right? And so we were looking for people who built satellites that could detect threats to our country in outer space, right? That's a very, very small field of people, right? So AI is great to show me who those people are, right? I could use automated sourcing to show me who those people are, but those people are not going to actively be applying, right? It's going to take the human touch to determine, you know, what would motivate you? I know you're not looking. What would motivate you to consider a change one day? And then I'll call you back if I ever have that, right? Oh, wow, that would motivate you. Well, let me tell you about this, you know? So those are the kinds of things. And the same thing with diversity, right? If you're not getting enough diversity applicants, then there's going to have to be some proactive phone calls going out and proactive selling to these people to consider your jobs, right? So any of those regions, and like I said, the skill set may not be difficult to find for that distribution center of a large retailer, right? It may not be a tough skill set, but you need so many at certain times of the year that the human touch is going to have to be there to motivate people, right? And to close deals, make sure things don't fall apart in the end, right? So those are just always evaluate it for those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, I want to kick it to the next slide here. I think Parker now, we've talked about kind of how AI can be applied, the different types of AI, but the question now I think is when it's best leveraged, and I guess at what point during the recruiting process and maybe the candidate journey that you can apply different types of AI. So I think Parker's going to hit on that now.
Yep. Hi again, guys. So let's talk about when we leverage AI, and I think it has to be a holistic thought around your complete technology stack. You may have to begin thinking about things in your organization as forming an AI stack or infusing artificial intelligence, whether that's machine learning or others, into your technology portfolio. So if we look at it holistically from multi-channel sourcing all the way through onboarding, we typically break this up into two main segments. So the right-hand side is your ATS or your applicant tracking system, right? So that's usually 20% of the candidate journey once they apply, right? They're in the process and that has to be followed. 80% of that journey is on the left-hand side where you see applications like SmashFly coming in, doing recruitment, marketing, core CRM, or 80% of the candidate journey on the front end of the process. We call this, thinking through this, as services-enabled architecture. So what you can do with this is think about forming a core system first to handle your operational processes. Think about having a recruitment marketing platform integrated with your applicant tracking system, and in that way it forms a set of a core set of technology that you can plug services into over time as you need to. So that might be conversational AI, it could be tools like HiringSolved, it could be video interviewing, and you're going to need different services at different times. So if you think about this services-enabled architecture, form a core operational element of your technology stack. Once that's done, then you can layer in services of that at the time that you need them. When you think about infusing AI, it's not just one place in your technology stack that this has to take place. You have to think about it holistically. So that might be applied in multi-channel sourcing on the front end with tools like HiringSolved to help you build automated pipelines. You might think of it in marketing and engagement. You could use intelligent automation there, so if people engage with you, the system is automatically communicating with them for relevant content. Same thing for forming talent networks or building talent networks and sourcing on the front end of the process. Screening and assessment we've given some examples of, either just doing data analysis and inferring things on the data through unsupervised learning in your applicant tracking system, even through evaluating candidates and letting the AI or the machine learning make recommendations on that as well through the screening and assessment process, or using that conversational AI or a chatbot to be able to screen a candidate at that point. In the interview area here that you see in orange, you can also use things like take HireView, for example, in video interviewing. So within that, they can actually use machine learning to analyze those video interviews and then make predictions on which candidate is more qualified from that. So when you think about your technology stack and when to leverage it in AI, it's really not a one-size-fits-all. You need to think about how you design that through solution architecture and through solution design to be able to implement these components. And so to give you a couple of real-world examples of what that might look like, let's just take through three major segments. So we just broke this down into three major segments so you guys could see a couple of potential tools you might be able to utilize. So think about omni or multi-channel sourcing on the front end, right? That's usually your digital channels, identifying candidates at that point, doing web sourcing, right? So on the front end of that, you may be using tools like HiringSolved, where they have their talent feed, which is basically the Siri for recruiting. It's searching the full and aggregating the internet as a database for talent. It might be using the projects component of HiringSolved, where you can take a job description, place that in the tool. Then it helps you build out your talent pipelines from that, find those hard to fill or hard to find candidates, and then use machine learning to tweak the algorithm to get better and better. As part of that too, if you think about things like SmashFly, that's helping you manage those channels. It's helping you build the relationships with the candidates, the talent networks, and the talent communities. So that infusing AI with those components really gets you ahead of the game. Things like Springroll help on the front end for the sourcing component, and even ARIA that's out there as well. New up-and-coming technology that basically allows you to engage candidates, evaluate candidates, and get them screened and engaged before a human ever gets involved. So that's one part of the process. If we move on and look at the marketing engagement piece, there's ways you can use things like, here you would look at chatbots or conversational AI, advertisements, recruitment marketing, some of the things that SmashFly brings to the table here as well. But there's also tools such as Textio, that's an augmented writing platform. So essentially you take a job description, which I've used this myself, based on all the data that's mining across the web, you take your job description and paste that in. It will give you recommendations on whether that job is the right length. Do you have too many bullet points? Are you using the right terminology? And it's doing all this with machine learning. You know, is your job description gender biased? It'll tell you all that, and then actually offer recommendations to you as well. Then introduce tools such as Olivia in this process, which is a chatbot. So a chatbot is basically an interaction point via text or via an interface on the front of your career site where someone can chat with a machine. And with the Olivia component, you can do things like screening an individual. You can provide them an on-demand knowledge base to answer questions with candidates. You can use it for not only the screening aspects, but scheduling interviews as well through the tool. You can use it for referrals. There's lots of ways you can utilize this technology and tie all those things back into a platform such as SmashFly to be able to just enhance that technology stack. And then finally, looking at assessment and selection, a couple of examples here. And you can see that a couple of these tools play in different areas. So HiringSolved also plays, actually they play in each part of this, but they can also help with stack ranking and evaluating candidates. Olivia can help with screening candidates in the chatbot realm. Interviewed.com is an assessments platform, and they have AI-powered assessments and conversations there as well. In addition to that, you have tools like Ideal that are out there evaluating candidates. They're one of the organizations that's using the unsupervised learning to analyze your ATS data. And then on the front end of that process too, they can help you analyze and provide recommendations on applicants to a specific job in the context of that and executing reinforcement learning. So just do a quick Google, guys. There are a ton of tools that are out there today that you can utilize for this. We just wanted to provide you some real-life examples showing you where these pieces might fit into the overall process. So how do you begin to think about this, right, as an organization? Because I can tell you right off the bat that if you take a broken process and you apply technology, you're going to have a really expensive broken process, right? So you want to think about the overall journey from a couple of different angles, and you can leverage design thinking to do this as well. And this isn't meant to be specific to any one customer, client, or anyone on the phone, but it's really a template of how it might look if you were to think through the process. So, for example, design thinking is really just a methodology. It's used by designers to solve complex problems and find solutions. It draws upon logic and imagination and intuition and even systematic reasoning to be able to explore the possibilities of what could be, right? And then that breaks down into a couple of categories. In design thinking, you think about defining the problem, and creating and considering all the options, and then refining the selected direction. And when you find a winner, you execute on that, right? So it's good to look at the entire process across and think about what is the candidate experience, what is the hiring manager experience across all these different aspects of talent acquisition, or TA. Now, we would also challenge you within this too to think about and reimagine the recruitment process from a couple of different personas, right? One of those first personas might be your hiring managers. So as you're going through your design thinking aspects and you're mapping out each component of the process internally, and you're really honing that down, your hiring managers are one of those groups or personas of people you need to think about how it impacts. They want responsiveness. They want lasting and measurable impacts to the teams, the projects, and the companies. So if you're applying AI and machine learning the right way, you can positively impact that persona. Same thing with your TA program leads. They want to trust their systems. They want an agile workforce. They want real-time insights and innovation. Machine learning and AI can definitely be applied to do that, but you have to think through how you design it and consider your program leaders or your talent acquisition program leaders in that as well. Third, and we've talked a lot about this, is the candidate profile. So within the candidate profile, you need to think about how the candidates are impacted as part of machine learning. And early results that we've done have shown a positive impact of how machine learning and even conversational AI are helping with the candidate experience. And then finally, you need to think about your talent acquisition delivery team, those people that are delivering those services to candidates for you. So they expect things to be harmonized. They want innovative technology, which everything we've talked about today is. They want training and career opportunities. So the main point of these is to reimagine your recruiting, use design thinking and how you map this process out and where you actually apply artificial intelligence or machine learning to this overall process.
That's great, Parker. So I think now we've talked about the different definitions and types of AI and the technologies that you can use to apply it. But I think the next progression is, what about the people? What about the TA professionals out there, the people listening to this webinar? Where does that leave those people in their jobs and their everyday roles? I think, again, just to reiterate that we're not talking about AI as a replacement of those people. It's the goal here is really for it to augment what you do and to make you better at your job, similar to what Jeremy was talking about earlier. With surgeons, it's not replacing the surgeon, it's making the surgeon better at his job, his or her job. So I'm going to kick it back to Jeremy now to talk about kind of where this human touch makes a difference and where the recruiter and the TA professional can kind of jump in to leverage AI in the right way. And then we're going to wrap it up after that with Q&A.
Absolutely. So as AI moves into everything that we do, right, the ideal thing for me is that we're able to focus on where the human touch makes a difference, right? So that could be in the requisition intake meeting. So when you're working with a hiring manager, truly understanding what they're looking for and having that influential conversation and helping them understand what you can do and how they could kind of open the parameters of the search to make it more fillable, right? Working together with that manager. Candidate engagement. You'll be able to spend more time working with people to get them interested in you and your organization. Interviewing candidates, right? Basically, with a really good interview, you get so close to a candidate. You learn what motivates them and what their goals are in life, and you're able to really build a connection that will take you all the way through the placement process, right? And in closing, right? You need to be spending time with people. If you're screening people really transactionally, can you do this? Can you do this? Great. Then you get to the end at the offer, and you don't have enough information to help that person make a good decision, right? And you don't really understand their motivators to make sure that they understand the position well. So it'll allow you to close more deals, right? So as AI takes a lot of these really just monotonous tasks away from us, it gives us more time to do all of these things, which will drastically increase the number of deals we close and the number of counteroffers that we lose candidates to, right? Because we're going to understand them and kind of be able to head those things off before they happen. That kind of go to the question? Does that kind of take us where you were thinking?
Yeah, it's perfect. I think, again, it's as we're kind of getting to the end here and working toward the summary, I think the next slide, this quote that you dug up, Jeremy, I think perfectly sums it up. If you want to speak to it here, but I think again,
yeah.
the value of that human touch and that relationship building is never going to go away. But I'll let you kind of take it away here.
Absolutely. So Thomas Friedman said, no matter what your profession, doctor, lawyer, architect, accountant, ad recruiter, if you're an American, you better get good at the touchy-feely service stuff, because anything that can be digitized can be outsourced to either the smartest or the cheapest producer. And so I firmly believe that. And so as we look at AI and machine learning taking over the process, we definitely need to be, if you love technology, right, you need to get even more technical than you are today. And then I think that as you're able to look at technology and know that it's working correctly, it's going to give you time to do all the touchy-feely parts of our business that are actually going to make us even better than we are today. The number one complaint, I think, with candidate experience right now is the lack of a personal touch and the lack of a feeling they were respected, right? So I think all of this boils down to, once we implement correctly all of this AI and machine learning, we're really going to be able to take care of people, which is what we're supposed to do in the first place.
Okay, great. All right, so we're down to 6 minutes here, and I want to make sure we leave some room or time for Q&A at the end. So I'm just going to summarize kind of what we thought are the key takeaways here. Again, this is going to sound like a broken record, but ultimately AI isn't eliminating recruiters, it's empowering and augmenting recruiters. The idea being that it's going to make us all more efficient in finding and hiring the best people out there and automating some of the processes that allow us to focus on the strategic side of recruiting. So it's targeted sourcing efforts, delivering more personalized, contextually relevant candidate experiences. Maybe it's nurturing stronger relationships with candidates. The bottom line is it'll take all those menial kind of boring everyday tasks that take up a lot of our time, and it'll free us up to focus on the things that really matter. So there's no doubt at this point that the pace of innovation is quickening, and AI is only going to get better. There's still some questions around how it's going to make us better and what the application of this technology will be, but I think just if we're going to walk away with something, ultimately in the end, it's that this is, again, something that Jeremy found, but I think we have to find the proper balance of man and machine. And if we do that, it's not a question of replacement, it's just a question of how it's going to make us better. But Parker and Jeremy, I don't know if you have anything else to kind of add here, or a final kind of takeaway or thought for the group.
I don't. What about you, Parker?
Go ahead, Jeremy. I'm good. I think it's really what you said about the balance, and finding that balance and adjusting the way we handle these things in the future. It'll become less about those task-driven things that recruiters and others do every day, and moving us more and more to the soft skills that we talked about: engaging candidates, selling, talking about the employee value proposition and why they should work at your organization. And I think the term of augmented intelligence is something we should think about as well. It's augmenting what the recruiters do and simply making them better. It's not really meant to replace. But thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's perfect. All right, so we got a ton of questions. We probably won't be able to cover all of them, and we might do what we've done in the past and write a follow-up blog post to try and answer what we can on this webinar. But I'll start with one of the questions that I think is probably really relevant here. And I'm going to pass this off to you, Parker and Jeremy, but that question is, how do I get started with AI, and does this involve a change to my ATS, or are there separate tools I should be using?
I'll jump in on that if you don't mind, Jeremy, and then I think getting started. Yeah, I think getting started with it is one of the things we talked about in here, and being able to do that design thinking session internally, and just put a mirror up and understand your own processes. It may start in the applicant tracking system, but it may not. Right? When you do your design thinking session and look that up, it's a really great way to flush things out. What you'll uncover in the process is where automation can really give you a lift, right? Whether those repetitive things are happening, that might be in your CRM, That might be in your applicant tracking system. It might be on your front-end sourcing. Could be as simple as your recruiters are posting jobs manually when they really could have an application do that for them, right? And that could be automated. So I would start with that design thing in the process piece because, again, broken process plus technology is just really expensive, broken process.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. It's technology is something that can fix a lot of things, but if you don't address the really core problems or the strategic problems, then you're not really going to get anywhere. So the next question here was, so many tools claim to have AI capabilities. How do you sift through the technologies out there to know which ones can actually help your business versus which ones can help you do your job better? I'll pass that off to Jeremy here.
Yeah, so this is something that really annoys me, right? It's AI and machine learning. For anything that, any new tool that you're looking at, it should involve some AI and machine learning concepts, right? And so everybody keeps using AI and machine learning to market their tool. And instead of trying to understand exactly what the AI is doing, you should try to understand what are my problems and does this solve my problems, right? When you look at a website, right, do you necessarily ask every type of coding that they use, or do you look and try to understand if it was a good user experience, right? When you're at the auto shop, do you ask how your carburetor works, or do you just want to know that it gets you where you're going, right? So I always encourage everybody to move beyond the buzzwords. Everybody's using it as a buzzword, but the most important thing is what is your problem that you need addressed, and does it solve that problem? So Parker has evaluated a lot of tools recently, so he'll have another take on that. But to me, that's the most important thing. Don't try to understand exactly how they built it technically. Just look at your problems and make sure it addresses those issues.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think if you start with your outcomes, start with the end in mind, right? That's some of the basics. But start with end in mind and the outcomes. Determine that problem, and then find technologies that help you address that. And then, the way I am with technology, I make organizations show me, right? So one of the first requirements I have of most tools is, do you have a sandbox that I can utilize and prove it to me, right? So there's definitely ways to do that, a way to see that. We rely on their case studies and data and reference checks as well with those. That helps out too. And have a really thorough process of how you evaluate, not only from the technical capabilities, but think about things like data privacy, what's coming with GDPR and things like that in 2018. So you need to understand that security and data privacy aspects as well as you get into this.
That's opening up a whole another can of worms right there, Parker.
It's another webinar.
I know, exactly. All right, so we're up against the clock here. It's 3 o'clock. We had about 10 more questions that were really good that we didn't get to. We're going to follow up with a blog post, and we're going to work with Jeremy and Parker on writing that. Jeremy and Parker, if you didn't know that, well, you just found out. So, yeah,
Happy to be volunteer.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Hopefully you guys learned a little something about AI and kind of were able to debunk some of the myths or confusion around it. Don't forget to check out HiringSolved and Allegis Global Solutions, or AGS, after this. Some really cool companies doing some amazing things in this space specifically, but in recruiting generally. And like I said, we'll follow up with the recording and the slides after the fact. But that's a wrap for today. Thanks again for joining, everyone. Thanks, Parker and Jeremy, for all the brilliance.
Thanks all. Much appreciated. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.